One problem I didn't mention before is resistance from commercial vets to free neutering for everybody. Now, that has been a problem in Turkey, and I think the best way to diffuse that is to engage those commercial vets in the neutering campaign, possibly via a voucher scheme, a government-funded or municipality-funded voucher scheme. Now, obviously, that's open to abuse if the vets are dishonest, so you have to try and devise a way to prevent them defrauding the government or the municipality. But if all dog keepers, including factories, businesses, farms, etc., were given a neutering voucher for a value of perhaps €20, something like that, that they could cash in at a commercial vet rather than bringing their dogs to your NGO-run neutering clinic, then the commercial vets would share in the commercial benefit of the neutering campaign. So this chart is based on a city of about 2 million people, like Bucharest in Romania, with a carrying capacity of 100,000 unsupervised or inadequately supervised dogs, and we are basing this on 50% male, 50% female dogs, but in fact there is evidence that there will be more males than females. So if it's 55% male, 45% female, or 60-40, that will help us, because as explained before, we are worried about female dogs, not about male dogs. I'm assuming that a skilled vet, an experienced vet, using the conveyor belt system of neutering, can comfortably, easily neuter 20 dogs per day. So if we have 6 clinics in our imaginary city doing nothing but neutering, they can neuter 120 dogs per day. We are assuming a life expectancy on average of 4 years. As I mentioned before, most of the genuine street dogs, which are not owned or kept in factories or houses, will only live maybe 2-3 years. So life expectancy of 4 years is reasonable. But I've also done a line, if the life expectancy is 8 years, that's in red, and then the effects of Neuter and Return are slower. And the green line is assuming, I think it's the wrong way around actually, the green line is if 120 dogs per day are neutered, and the blue line is if there are 60 dogs per day neutered. So that's the wrong way around, sorry about that. So, but obviously the more dogs per day you neuter, the quicker you get the unsupervised dog population down to almost zero, which takes maybe 6, 7, 8 years, depending how efficiently you do it. This is our budget, our cheap neutering clinic in the city of Oradea in Romania, Western Romania, and this is where we actually implemented the theory of Neuter and Return and proved in practice that it worked. So Oradea had at least 5,000 street dogs, unsupervised dogs, maybe nearer to 10,000 in 2004. We didn't count them properly when we began the project. And on the left-hand side is an official letter from the municipality of Oradea confirming that by 2011, that was dated sometime in 2011, I think it was August 2011, we had reduced the number of street dogs to only 350. So in Oradea, we started off neutering in the centre of the city, collecting dogs, and we radiated outwards, we worked outwards. Door by door, street by street, factory by factory, block of flats by block of flats. So this has to be organised in the manner of a military campaign, planned logically, bit by bit, like the Battle of Stalingrad, house by house. And right up to the edge of the conurbation, and then include villages around, because Help in Suffering, who do Neuter and Return in Jaipur in India, have found that street dogs will travel up to 7 kilometers looking for food and, of course, looking for a mate if a female is on heat. So that is how we carried out the project. And even in gypsy areas, gypsies are renowned for having dogs in Europe and not having them neutered. But even in gypsy areas, we got the cooperation of the dog keepers. They were suspicious at first, but later when they saw their dogs were brought back, healthy, vaccinated, free of charge, they cooperated as well. So Neuter and Return must be implemented nationally because the dogs do not respect city boundaries, municipal boundaries. They will wander in search of food or mates. So there may be some cities, I don't know Taiwan very well, there may be some cities like here on the East Coast or here which are islands for dogs, and you could do a Neuter and Return project here and maybe here, I don't know, and it would not be sabotaged by the immigration of dogs from the West Coast. But from what I've seen, the West Coast is all one great big conurbation. So you have to implement Neuter and Return all the way from Taipei right down to Kaohsiung. Obviously a perfect place to do it would be on these islands because that would be easy. I don't know how populated they are, but by the look of it, quite populated. So the densely populated areas here, they will have the most dogs. So the more people, the more dogs. Not necessarily the more unsupervised dogs. Perhaps people in the cities are more responsible, more educated, but the number of dogs will always be, the total number of dogs will always be in proportion to the number of people. So this is a map of the city of Oradea where we did that project. And there are various scientific methods for counting dog population, which, to be honest with you, I've never really understood. But so I developed my own system of approximately calculating the number of unsupervised dogs. So what we did, oh sorry, wrong one. What we do is we get a car, or you could get a rickshaw even, and you have 2 people in it, or 3 people in it, maybe a driver and 2 counters. And you drive very, very slowly through the whole built-up area, going down as many back streets, factory, yards, etc., go the longest possible route you can through the city, northwest to southeast, edge to edge of the conurbation, not the city boundaries. And then another vehicle does the same thing from northeast to southwest. And you assume that you can see every dog, and this has to be done obviously not in the pouring rain but in temperate weather, maybe early in the morning or in the evening, but while it's still light, and count how many dogs you can see left and right. If you assume that on average you can see 50 metres right and 50 metres left, obviously sometimes there will be walls and buildings, so you can't see more than maybe 5 metres, but other times there will be open spaces, parks, fields, etc., yards, car parks, where you can see the dogs 100 metres away. So if you say that on average you can see every dog 50 metres left, 50 metres right, that's 100 metres. If you drive, say, 10 kilometres all through the city as slowly as you can, counting all the dogs, then you've driven 10 kilometres times 100 metres, so you've counted all the dogs in 1 square kilometre. If you then calculate the complete area of the city, which might be, let's say, 100 square kilometres, then you extrapolate your figures and you know roughly how many unsupervised dogs there are in the city. And that way is quicker and easier than doing other techniques which I've read about photographing the dogs and then going back later and seeing how many of the dogs you see on the second day and on the third day and the fourth day, etc. So that's how we did it. I can't prove that it's accurate, but it gives you an approximate number of dogs in any one city, and it's easy to do, easy and quick to do. Yeah, what I forgot to mention is avoid main roads. Go down as many small back streets round the back of blocks of flats, etc. as you can. So there are, in my opinion, 2 very important aids to a successful Neuter and Return project. And the first is school education. Obviously, at the beginning of a Neuter and Return project, it's fairly easy to find fertile dogs in your city. But later on, after you've neutered and returned those dogs, it becomes more and more difficult because they're dogs that people keep, hide, they're in private property, etc. So, in addition to the door-to-door canvassing, we found it very important to engage school children as our dog scouts, looking for dogs, telling us where they are. Usually the children know where there are dogs in their area. And secondly, by educating the children in responsible dog ownership, we educate their parents through the children. And eventually, those children will become adults and voters, and of course we hope they will then educate the politicians in countries like Romania, where frankly the politicians are not interested in animal welfare and are not even very interested in human welfare. So our school education booklet, which was prepared by educationalists, not by me, that has been translated into various languages. and we give the children a free t-shirt, as you can see in the photo, as a reward for doing the course. We have never organised this through ministries of education, etc., because they're too bureaucratic and too slow. We have always gone directly to the school director, the school headmaster or mistress, and amazingly in Romania, not one single school has ever refused to let us teach their children. So, which is surprising. You would have thought that they would say, oh no, we don't have permission from the ministry, I'll have to ask my boss or whatever. But no, they've always accepted us. And this helps us find dogs and of course helps educate the population generally. And I think, unfortunately I haven't got a slide of it here for you, but the best part of this education booklet is at the back, I think, where we have a before and after quiz. So the child sees a photo of a miserable, diseased, sick dog. Here, Mary, when we found the dog, and then sees a photo of the same dog a few months later or a year later when the dog is rehomed to a family and is a healthy, happy, loyal family pet. And then we show photos of lots more miserable dogs with mange and injuries and sickness, etc., and photos of happy family dogs. And the children have to try and match the before photo with the after photo. And it's a nice little quiz for them, nice exercise. And of course it gets the message across that however poor and miserable a dog is on the streets with mange, with injuries, with disease, that dog can become a happy, loyal, healthy family pet. So this is the new t-shirt we've been giving to children, and that says in Romanian, every dog deserves an owner. Obviously, a responsible owner. So now we come to the political lobbying, political problem. And as I said earlier, in Turkey we were very successful, but probably because we managed to persuade one man, President Erdogan, and he is a dictator. So if he says neuter and return, everybody neuters and returns. But in Romania, we've not been successful. And one very good idea, I think, has been devised by our colleagues in Turkey, where there is an organisation called HITAP, and these are educated people, lawyers, academics, etc., who fight for animal rights and animal protection. And we've now translated this into English from Turkish. And the idea is that we present all candidates at municipal elections and later at government elections, the parliament elections, with a pledge, a promise. So they are promising to protect human and animal health, promote the humane treatment of animals, support the closure of pet shops, selling live pets, control breeding, ban animals from exploitation in circuses, and in Romania we include in this that they should support neuter and return and open shelters. So this is the covenant that we are asking candidates to sign. And if they agree, they sign. If they're then elected, they become mayors or councillors or members of parliament. And if they then do nothing, which of course most of them won't do very much, we understand that, at least we can put them under moral pressure to keep their promise. So we can also say that we will publish the names before the election, say 1 week before the election, in the newspapers of all the candidates who have signed the pledge. And by implication, of course, people should not vote for the candidates who have not signed the pledge. And then later, if a candidate who has signed the pledge is elected, we can then also place a newspaper advertisement shaming him that he signed the promise, but he's not done anything, he's done the opposite. There are still animals being abused in circuses in his town, or pet shops selling dogs, or whatever. So I think this is quite an interesting idea, quite a good idea. Obviously you need some money to pay for the newspaper adverts, and you need volunteers who lobby the candidates to sign. But I suspect that once one or two candidates have signed, the others will sign, even though they might not actually care about animal welfare. Okay, so now we come to the second big aid to a neuter and return program, which is an open dog shelter. And this is something that I've pioneered, because for years and years carrying out neuter and return programs, we had the problem, what do we do with surplus dogs which cannot be returned to the streets for either political reasons, because they're bothering traders in the marketplace, for example, or because they're grown puppies dumped on us, or because they're abandoned family pets that could not survive on the streets, or blind or handicapped dogs. What do you do with these dogs? How do you, if you can't rehome them, what is the alternative to either euthanasia or imprisonment? And obviously, as animal lovers, we don't want to be euthanizing healthy dogs, but nor do we want to be keeping them in prisons, death camps, dog Auschwitzes. So I've been looking all my life, well not all my life, but the last 20 years, for a third way. And I think we found this with this concept of open shelters. So we have 85 hectares of land about 20 kilometers from Oradea, 1 kilometer from the nearest village, and about a third of it is forest, and the rest is open fields. And we have 800 dogs there, divided roughly into 4 groups, although the groups can intermingle. And we have a guard, a day guard, and a night guard, this guy here, with the dogs 24 hours a day. So we have 4 day guards, one for each group of dogs, of about 200, and 4 night guards. And the dogs will voluntarily stay around the guard. So the guard becomes the sort of leader of the pack, and he feeds the dogs, he collects their poo if necessary, puts it in the dog food bags. We spread the dog food around, use these troughs for feeding, so there's no fighting between the dogs over food. And the results have been really better than we expected. We have very few dog fights. You can see here, there's a lovely photo of healthy, happy dogs whose quality of life is worth living. They have a worthwhile, free, healthy life at very low cost. We only have to pay the guard salaries and their food and some veterinary care. There are no diseases like parvovirus, distemper, etc. in the open air, as there would be in an enclosed traditional prison camp type shelter. So this is, I think, the answer. It's not an aim in itself, but it is an aid to an integrated neuter and return project. So there are a few fenced in areas because these are dogs that we're going to rehome, or they might be dogs that we want to separate for some reason from the pack. And also we need to put older, weaker dogs into protected areas so that the young, fitter dogs don't attack them. But we have very few dog fights, even though these dogs are completely free. We maybe lose about 10 dogs per year to dog fights. So dog fights can be a problem, but because the dogs are well fed, they're not fighting for food. There are obviously no fertile females for them to fight over. So we just have to try and make sure that weaker, older dogs are not attacked by the pack. This is the nearest village, about 1 kilometre away, where our workers live. And the night guards, or day guards, walk along this track and then up through the forest. And the new guard has to arrive for work before the old guard goes back to the village, because otherwise the dogs will follow him back to the village and kill people's chickens. So it's very important that the guard is there 24 hours a day, and then 99% of the dogs will voluntarily stay around him. And if 1% wanders off, we did have one dog that went all the way back to Aradia, but it doesn't matter really, because that dog is neutered and he can't reproduce, or she can't reproduce. So we're not really worried if 1 or 2 dogs wander off and go into the villages, providing they don't cause problems, killing people's chickens, etc. We do have one area of for what we call village dogs, which is enclosed, a large fenced-in area, because those are the dogs which have, in the past, gone back to the village and caused problems. But 90% of the dogs are harmless, cause no problems, and simply stay voluntarily in the open shelter where they have shelter and food. This is the hut where the night guard sleeps. The triple kennels or double kennels are obviously more cost effective than single kennels. and I think that's the night guard's toilet. So he has a toilet, so he doesn't have to go in the forest. What? Kennel is the doghouse.
Ah, okay.
The doghouse.
Oh, sorry. So the triple one is better than the single one.
Well, double or triple kennels are cheaper because they use less material per dog than a single kennel.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody has any questions, please fire away.
我是临床兽医师，那我首先很感谢那个 Robert Smith 先生来台湾为我们分享这些经验。好，那我想要问的问题是关于他那个开放式的收容所部分。对，因为目前依照台湾的动保法14条啊，那依照各县市直辖市要规划所谓的动物收容所，或是委托民间机构团体设置动物收容所或福利场所。那目前这个部分其实在台湾其实还蛮常见的。那其实，在台湾，因为收容者不太一样的话，因为地狭人稠，那所以其实，在这样的开放式空间上，其实会有一些所谓的问题。第一个问题是我想要就是说，第一个可能土地取得问题。土地部分，它可能是因为想要了解，就是国外他们就是当 Robert 先生是怎样的经验。这个土地的问题部分，第一个可能是这个土地它是以农业用地或是用怎样的用地去取得的。因为必须上面的建物可能也会有因应它怎样的问题去产生，会不会有法规违建的问题。第二个部分是关于污水跟噪音的处理，因为台湾其实在很多民众会反映说，这些其实会造成说他们的困扰。那是不是台湾有些，我是觉得国外或者台湾法规上面是不是能够对于这一方面的处理会有更详细的研究？那第三个是他要如何跟当地居民去做沟通。我想问这三个面向，我想在这边请教Robert先生，谢谢。
Yeah. Okay. Well, the local community will be happy to have the jobs provided by an open shelter, providing the shelter is far enough from the village not to cause any problems. So I would say it needs to be at least 1 kilometre from the nearest village. Sewage is not a problem. For our open shelter for the human sewage, that goes into a septic tank. And the dog poo, they either go off into the forest and poo, or around where there are a lot of dogs, we collect the poo in the dog food bags. We think we have 20 kilo or 50 kilo dog food bags. So we bring the dog food bags in the morning to feed the dogs, and then we put the food back in the bags, and then it's taken away by the rubbish collection service, the municipal rubbish collection service. I don't know Taiwan very well. From what I've seen on the map, it looks to me as if you could only have open shelters in the eastern part of the country and in the mountains. I don't think, for the reasons you've said, it's practical in the western densely populated part of the country.
那土地取得部分，因为它可能是以农业用地或是怎样用地去取用的。
Well, we bought agricultural land, and in fact, we have a farm where we grow organic fruit and spelt and sunflower. But in Romania, there is a lot of empty land. So I would suggest in a country like Romania, where there's empty land, you use empty land. Natural water is an advantage, otherwise you have to have a ground pump. And of course electricity is an advantage, otherwise you have to have a generator.
想请教一下，就是说，其实我刚才注意到，有提到，其实访视去了解说狗狗到底那个多少数量，其实蛮重要的，还有结扎。那想请问是说，在投入人力访视，其实这个是需要很大的人力的。那结扎需要很多的经费。想了解说， 这样做1年下来的话，像那个罗马尼亚那个计划，大概需要多少人力跟多少的经费？谢谢。
Well, I've calculated that in Romania, a national Neuter and Return program will cost €1 per citizen in the first year, dropping to about 70 cents in the second year, and then gradually dropping down after 10 years to nothing. So €1 is probably going to be about 35 New Taiwan dollars per citizen per year. So I think how many people in Taiwan? 23 million. Okay, so you're talking about roughly 23 million euros. So that's going to be about 70 to 80 million. No, wait a minute. 23 million. No. So it's going to be about 700, 800 million new Taiwanese dollars. But I think you have fewer unsupervised dogs in Taiwan than we have in Romania or in Turkey. So I think you would be starting off from a better position. So I would guess that a budget of 500 million New Taiwan dollars would be enough for your first year. And obviously that money is not wasted because a lot of it will go in vet salaries. And there is opportunity for commercial sponsorship from, for example, dog food manufacturers, Pedigree Chum or whatever, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, whoever, you know, who would pay for the vehicles, have their adverts perhaps on the vehicles, on the neutering clinics. So there's lots of opportunities for commercial sponsorship to reduce the cost to the taxpayer.
因为我们了解 Robert 是 NGO 组织，那我们想要知道，就是说，不论是在土耳其或者是在罗马尼亚进行的一个相关的计划，政府的角色是什么？那是不是有相关的一个预算、经费各方面的一个投入？
No, we have no funding from the government. In Turkey, as I mentioned, we did persuade the government in 2005, Mr. Erdogan personally, to include Neuter and Return as part of the animal protection law, but he refused to allow NGOs to implement it. He insisted that municipal and government vets must implement Neuter and Return. Now, obviously, that was disappointing for me because I would have liked NGOs to do it. I thought we would be more humane, more efficient, would be better at persuading people to hand over their dogs than government officials. But nevertheless, it has been successful in Turkey, sporadically, not everywhere, but I have met now government vets who are very enthusiastic. In fact, when we were in Istanbul for the ICAM conference, I couldn't believe it. It was, you know, everything this government vet told me was, he was like a parrot repeating everything that I had preached for years. So in Turkey, the program is being carried out by the government with sometimes help locally from some NGOs. In Romania, we are nowhere. The government is not interested in the success we showed of Neuter and Return in Oradea. They have brought in a law which is suitable for the UK or France or Germany or Holland, but not suitable for Romania. The law is that municipalities must have a dog management service. The dog management service must collect all loose dogs. The dogs must be rehomed or euthanized. Well, they don't say they must be euthanized. They may be euthanized after 14 days. And the result of this law is a disaster. There are municipal Auschwitzes for dogs throughout Romania, and very few examples of successful neuter and return. And certainly the government in Romania, and also the European Union, much to my disappointment, has not financed neuter and return projects as they should have done. And I and other people frequently campaign in Brussels for the European Union to finance this in countries like Bulgaria, Romania, Cyprus, Greece, that have loose dog problems, but they always say, no, it's not within our competence. The EU is a commercial organisation. Animal welfare is the preserve of individual member states. So this is the sore point, this is an argument, this is something we still have to address.
Hello, I'm the clinical lab here, and there's two questions about it. And you said open shelter seems very workflow in these kind of problems. So how many open shelters in Romania now? And is there any people against this project before? And how do you convince them to start the project? And the other question is there any policy to restrict the problem about dumping, abandonment, and how do you restrict the dog breeders in Romania? Thank you.
Well, as far as I know, we have the only open shelter in Romania, although somebody recently did tell me that somebody else had started one nearer to Bucharest, but I haven't been there. So as far as I know, our open shelter is unique. What was the other question? That was... dog dumping is, of course, illegal, whether it's done by municipalities or by private individuals. But the Romania is a country, it's the Wild East, it's a bit like the Wild West in the cowboy films. The laws in Romania are not enforced very well. The laws, regulations are tools for the rich and powerful to use to oppress ordinary citizens. Laws don't seem to apply to the rich and powerful. For example, I've seen the Prime Minister and ministers driving through villages with their convoys of huge Mercedes cars at massive speed, 160, 180 kilometers an hour, whereas if you or I do it, the police will stop us and we'll get a penalty if we go faster than 70 kilometers an hour. So that's just a petty example of how the people in power in Romania misuse their power. So if a mayor in a town says to his director of public administration, his chief official, I'm fed up with complaints about dogs, I don't want dogs, get rid of the dogs, then what does that man do? He doesn't have a shelter, they haven't followed the law, they don't have a dog management service, so he collects the dogs, puts them in the back of the truck, and dumps them in the forest in another town 100 kilometers away. And it's amazing that this happens. You wouldn't think it would happen. I had never anticipated this, but it does. So municipalities cross-dump dogs on each other.
我想我们首先以一个最热烈的掌声来谢谢 Robert。